So we had taken this bike into the dealer back in middle of November when the Diff spun out on us, and left it there for them, and they said they had trouble getting parts. So that was fine. Then parts were supposed to be in around the middle of January. Well, parts didn't come in, and they said the best expected date they could do or hoping for from Honda would be 1st of April. So rather than letting it sit there for another 2.5 months and maybe not even get the parts, we brought it home so it wasn't in their way. So then we got looking around on the internet and found that we could order a complete Diff for about $350. They wanted $950 through them, I believe it was, and they couldn't even get it. So on Amazon, it came to the rescue again. So today we're going to attempt to fix this thing. Then we'll have another bike. But due to the bike's age that we're trying to fix with 25,000 kilometers and the shortage of parts and ATVs in general with the COVID excuse, we decided to buy a new pony. So we had to drive, Dad drove about 4 hours to go get this one. From what we could tell, there was only two 420s in all of Alberta model year 2023. We had to go all the way to Olds, Alberta to get this one. At Trackside Sales, they were nice enough. They held it for us until Dad could travel 4 hours to get there and load it up in a half hour, and he was headed home. So this is a 2023 420. Haven't really rode it yet, but it should be good. We got our 01 350. Odometer hasn't worked forever on it, so we don't know how many kilometers it has. On a side note, I talked to the manager there at the local Honda dealer. I asked him how many kilometers was the most he'd ever seen on a bike. He says they had one customer that had 97,000 kilometers on a mid to early 2000s Honda 350. That's a lot. That'd probably be about 1 million kilometers on a regular pickup truck. So we're gonna get started on today's repair. This girl has got the rear hubs welded because the splines were worn. And 5 or 6 years ago we did that. Didn't want to spend the money to put in a new axle just to eventually do it again. So we gave them a little tack weld. Video I watched on YouTube, the guy showed taking all the brakes and everything off as well. But I think I can probably grind that hub off, take those nuts off, and I think if I'm lucky and understand his video right, I bet I can pull the whole hub, brake hub assembly off in one piece with the shaft and not have to grind this hub. Hopefully. That's what we're going to attempt for now. So we'll get started in trying to fix this thing. Tire off. We got to grind that hub yet, that weld off. But trying to save you some of the boring stuff. See if we can get these two nuts separated from each other. Moved a little bit. Might be able to put a wrench on it now and get her the rest of the way. It's gonna want to turn. I'm gonna have to block that other tire, maybe. Maybe this will work, maybe it won't. So I'm gonna have to put a bar and these studs over here on this hub to hold it. Get some more WD-40. kind of hit the threads in one spot a tiny bit with the air hammer, but I think they're gonna clean themselves out okay when the nut comes off, I believe. Okay, so because I'm gonna try and make some shortcuts and not take that all apart, I'm gonna measure the distance from this hub to the diff. So I know, actually maybe we'll go to the frame here, so when we put it back together, we can know that we're back close to the same as where it was when we took it apart. So we are 9 5/8 inches from the frame of the swing arm to the inner side edge of the wheel hub. 9 5/8. Okay, so I got the weld cut. I just carefully come inside the hub material and just cut close to the weld, so I can maybe leave a little bit of that weld as a shoulder stop to know where we got to shove the hub back onto. It'll at least be close. And I just cut it down slowly, a little bit at a time, turning the axle till I was able to, you could actually see indentations there where the splines and the hub meet. Right there, that's what I saw. So I was able to just cut it and turn it a little bit till I found those hubs. Stuck a chisel in between it, the crack, and give it a good couple whacks, and it broke the remaining weld, so I didn't end up cutting too far into the axle shaft. Got the nuts. So the nuts are loosened off. Next obstacle, this pipe I see is now all rusted on there. For the last 2 or 3 years, it's been floating around on there loose. You could hear it banging and clanging when you would ride. But now I see the dirt has made its way in there and it's stuck. So it might take a little bit of work getting it off. So that's the next step. Then I'll move over to getting brakes and everything unhooked and then seeing if we can get her to slide out. Well, actually, after I get this weld ground off a bunch more, so it'll slide through the diff. So the spacer is rusted on the shaft. I'm gonna try and see if we can tap the axle shaft all the way through by taking this other side off first, without having to try and heat it, mess around with it. So we ran into trouble getting this pipe spacer off. So I was able to get the whole works out. What we're gonna do is gonna see if we can weld a big nut or something on there. Either put a long jaw puller on to pull it off or press it out. So we're back again today on this old girl. Finally got the spacer off, that axle that used to float around so freely on there, but it was seized tight, had rust from there all the way to the bottom, full length of spacer. We had to take it up to one of our Hutterite colony friends who had a long jawed puller long enough to reach from the top all the way down there about 8-9 inches. And I welded another collar around the edge of the spacer. And with a lot of heat and pounding with an impact on the jaw puller and whacking it with the hammer on the screw of the puller, finally got her to come loose. So here's where we're at today. We're doing the best that we could to try and save the axle, but here's the end result. In the end, the real problem was we thought maybe the pinion was spun out of the differential. It's not. The splines are worn off the shaft, and also on the drive, on the ring gear, the inside of the diff. So looks like we're back to ordering a shaft anyways. Had we known, we could have ordered that before, but we've got one sourced, so we should be able to order one. And in time, we'll get this girl back and running. So the new quad axle has showed up now. First initial measurements, it seems like it measures the same. So we're gonna start taking apart the old diff setup. So here we got the old diff set up on the bench. I got the diff off, everything off the left-hand side of the bike. Just gotta get the brake housing assembly out now. After a little further inspection here, looks like you don't have to take the brake housing apart at all, unless you're planning on doing some sort of brake maintenance. We'll just give this shaft a tap here and see if it'll come out. There's the old shaft. See if we fit. See if we match the new one. It's like a couple very minor machining differences, but for the most part, I think it's the exact same. Should be set. There's also one O-ring you just gotta be careful here to save, because it goes right here in the end of the brake drum housing. It just seals off dirt from getting into the splines and whatnot of the axle and brake housing. So we finally got it all back together today. I didn't take video of the assembly stuff because it's pretty easy to reassemble, not much fancy there to do. Once you've got it all out on the bench, you can put it back together like nothing. The one thing I will tell you though, if you do not have to replace any of the brakes or work on any of the brake stuff, you don't need to separate this housing. You can, there's only an O-ring that holds the brake drum onto the shaft, and then there's the nuts that hold the axle centered on there. But I've seen other videos where it's saying we got to take this whole backing plate, separate the brakes from it. You do not. All this stuff will slide right out. What we ended up doing is taking those 4 nuts off, those 4 nuts off, and the whole works come out. I was able to put it all together on the floor, out underneath the machine. It was a little trickier to put back together. Took a couple other people just to line it up to get, because you got to line up 8 holes just right to get it all in. But other than that, it wasn't too bad. So 150 bucks for a shaft off Amazon, $350 for a complete differential off Amazon, and we're all back together. And when they shipped, that new differential does not have oil in it, so remember to put oil in it before you ride it. Thanks for watching.